Alright, so it's time to make the mounting plates for the cutter grinder. So first I take the old motor off, then have to use some WD-40 and get the post out, and then figure out where the motor base is. Cut some new chunks, clean them up. I think this is 1.5 by 1/4 inch, something like that. And then figure out where the holes go, and then drill the holes. And these holes are just going to be through holes that are countersunk such that I can use quarter 20 machine screws with the slants to go down in, and then that way it'll screw in. And the base originally had 10 millimeter, yeah, something like that. No, that can't be right. It had a metric thread. Let's put it that way. It had a metric thread, and it was not going to work for what I needed. So I drilled that out and put quarter 20 in. And then here I'm just making the bolts such that they go down in through into the base. And now I'm figuring out where the base holes are in the plate so that I can go through. And I screwed up this first. I initially drilled out for quarter 20. Problem is, I need it to number 7, not quarter 20, so I had to go back and re-drill. Hey, that's what happens when you drop the camera, because you have your cord in the way and you bump into it. And it happened again another time, too. That was really annoying. Didn't break the camera, though, luckily, so that's good. So now I'm going through, because in order to have the bolts come up through, I need to have the plates themselves threaded, such that I can put that in, and then when I put the motor down over, I can bolt it in without the bolts moving, because, yeah. So I had to do number 7 holes and then do threading and such. And that worked. It would have been nicer to have slightly thicker plates, but it worked. There we got the install, and then we're going to test it, and then we figure out, okay, I need to cut those shorter. I don't want to hacksaw it. I'm going to just use the cutoff wheel and the Dremel, and that worked fine. Sand it up, and we're good. Test it. Get the thing out of the way before you turn it on. There we go. Get all the bolts back in. Plug it in. And here's where we go. First test. Will it blow up? No. It all worked. So that's good. And then the one thing I noticed as it was spinning down, it slightly wobbles towards the end when it's almost down. It looks fine when it's spinning high speed, but there's a very slightest wobble when it's mostly done. Well, it's on. So that's a good thing. The adapter plates worked. I did initially, as you saw, screw up and drilled the up-through holes at 1/4 inch instead of number 7, and that meant I would not have been able to thread it, which I needed to thread the up-through bolts just slightly, even though I countersunk them. That way they don't rotate when I lock in the nuts. Otherwise, they would have just spun and it would have been a pain, especially under this side where the up-through bolts are underneath the motor and in between the plate. So I could have dealt with it here because I can access the back side because this is the extended section. But on the other side, that would not have worked. So luckily I had space to drill additional number 7 holes and then thread that, and yeah, it worked. So these were a good purchase. The quarter 20, I didn't need that long, but this is what they had in this size when I went to the store, so that's fine. So I used 8 of those, rounded stuff off. It's on there. The only thing I'm not completely sure on, and if I hold this, if I hold the phone still and rotate this, you can see there's the very slightest wobble. If you watch right along the edge, there's a slight wobble. That is because of the very little play, but just enough play on the inside. And then when the set screw comes in, that cants it to the side and tightens it up against the key. So hopefully that'll be fine. I don't think it's that the shaft is bent. I would hope not. It's a brand new motor, so I don't think it's the shaft's bent. But in any case, that should be minor enough to hopefully not matter. We'll see. But what I have it set up as, there's a little bit of a gap on this side, and this whole base, this lower base, can come out about a 1/2 inch, and out is the direction it would tighten whatever belt I get. So I think that is fairly lined up. I will have to do additional measuring once I get to that point, but I think that is really close to being lined up for where the belt's going to need to go. So that's good. Yeah, hopefully it'll work. Now I know this is way too short, so I can't even test it with that until I get a replacement belt, and I can't get this off until I take some of this stuff off. In order to get this off from watching videos, you have to take the wheel off, and then this whole upper guard and such comes off, and then you can get the belt off. I mean, obviously you can cut the belt to get the belt off, but as soon as you do that, you can't get a new belt back in, because this is not one of those kind of belts where you can get the link belts like you can for the V pulleys. So this has to be a continuous round pulley of some sort. The next thing I will have to do is actually get this off such that I can put a string or something around there to get the length, and then try and get belts. It runs. I did show it in the other bit. Yeah, so I think it's going to work. Because I don't have room for the original bolts anyway, because it has to have these going down through, and they have to be flush, hence the whole countersinking. And I'm glad I got a set of steel countersink bits, because initially I just had wood ones, and those don't do well in steel. But luckily I had steel ones, and so that worked pretty well. The only thing that would have been nice is if I had gotten the slightly thicker steel for bars, because I wasn't sure which size. This should be fine, but if it was thicker, I would have had more steel to use the threads for coming up through. But there's like 1 or 2 threads on all of them, so, and this isn't going to be a high, well, I think this is going to be fine. It just has to hold there. And once you clamp the nut down and tighten it, it's not going to want to spin anyway in that other thread section.